what's the goal of this conversation? Is it really to help this person learn and to help them understand the things that I want them to understand, or is it to pound my own chest? And am I going to use language that they don't even understand just to make myself sound smart? Or am I going to yell at them because I'm in a position that I can yell at them and they're not going to yell back, right? Like, those are all things that you have to manage if you want to be an effective communicator. If you want to just pound your chest, keep doing what you're doing.
Right. I mean, that gets back to the original point that I made of like, what's the point of this communication?
Right.
Because if you want to just be able to be like, I told them everything, it's like, yeah, but did they receive any of it? Welcome into the Train with the Best podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman, personal trainer, performance coach, and media personality.
I'm Chris Gorres, a 15-year strength and conditioning coach, master trainer, and international educator. This is the Train with the Best podcast, where we have conversations with some of the best and brightest minds in the health and fitness industry to make everyone listening, ourselves included, smarter about fitness.
And today, Chris, we're going to focus on communication, which is an essential part of being a successful coach. And for me, this is obviously, as a media personality, as someone who has a mass communications degree, something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and something that I think has elevated me in the fitness industry. I've told this story before, but when I walked into Courtney Dipp, our dear friend of the podcast and my first fitness director, when I walked into her office for the first time, she said, I know that I can hire you because you know how to talk to people. I can teach you how to train. And I think that, as we've talked to a bunch of different people over the years on this podcast and obviously had so many conversations with so many of our colleagues in the industry, that is the thing that binds, like the trait that goes through all of the great coaches that we know. They're not just really smart. They don't just know the science. They are master communicators and can really get their clients, whether they're professional athletes, weekend warriors, people coming off of surgery, whatever it may be, they can always get their clients to do what they want because they understand how to communicate.
Yeah, that's right. I've always said that, if you are going to take classes after obviously your initial certification classes, whether it be NASM or ACE or whatever, the thing that you probably want to study next is communication. How to speak to somebody, how to speak to a group, how to speak to an individual. What are the different filters in communication? How to communicate with somebody if they don't even speak your same language, as I've learned how to do when I do these international calls or when I go on international trips and I'm trying to explain some different concepts and trying to put them into words that are simple enough for people to understand. So yeah, I think communication is really it's the number one tool that makes a great trainer. More than just the knowledge of biomechanics or whatever. It's the way that you can communicate with people, the way that you can gain their trust, and the way that you can effectively teach somebody, right? Like, because you have to be able to connect with them, understand what they understand, and whatever the thought is that's in your head, that thought has to now be present in their head. And if you don't know how to download, Bluetooth, connect, or whatever, however you want to term it, right? Like, you have to be able to get your thought into their brain.
No doubt. And so by the end of the podcast today, we hope that everybody listening has a little bit better understanding of very basic communications theory, some of the ways in which coaches tend to go wrong, and some tools to help be a better communicator, whether it's as a coach or the good thing is these things apply well outside the gym. So in all aspects of life. Why are we talking about this? I was talking to Rachel this week about this, as a lot of our topics tend to happen. And it's so interesting to me, the dynamic between group fitness and the one-on-one type of stuff of if you're relying on just verbal communication like she is when she's got a microphone on at Solid Core being a group instructor, or when I can have a more one-on-one type of relationship that I have in my sessions. And I think that it's really important to kind of separate out some of the differences between those things, Chris, because if you are out in front of a group on a microphone, not being able to connect one-on-one in the very straightforward, intimate way that you are as a one-on-one trainer, the types of things that you might be thinking about, some of them are very different. Some of them are the same. I do think, though, that there's a classic saying of like 90% of communication is nonverbal. And
right.
While the actual ways in which you communicate might be a little bit different one-on-one versus on a group. Your body language, the energy you bring to a session, all that kind of stuff as a tone setter, I think is really important in making that first impression as soon as that client, whether it's a one-on-one or a group client, walks into the room, making sure that you are welcoming and have a positive attitude and are putting off positive energy that you're excited to see them is like the number one thing that's going to help make them open to any other communication you ultimately give them throughout their session, whether it's a half hour, whatever it is.
Yeah, and here's another thing that I want to throw out there, because it's not just you, it's not just your body language and your tone of voice and you know, the expressions on your face and all those other things. There's another thing to consider when you're trying to speak to somebody, because there's you, who is the speaker, there's them, who is the listener, there's your personality and their personality, which has to have some sort of connection, but then there's the environment that you have to consider as well, right? So, and the environment speaks to them just as much as you're speaking to them, right? So, are we at a class? Are there other people around that are watching us? Are we under pressure? Are we under a time clock? You know, is this a one-on-one meeting where we're sitting down at a table? Is this in the middle of a workout? So the environment creates a special challenge as well that has to be considered when you're speaking to somebody, right? Case in point, like if you think about a football team, the way that we communicate on game day, in the middle of a play, in the middle of the field, in the middle of a play call, is very different than the way that we speak to each other when we're in the film room, right? And it's the same thing. We're trying to accomplish the same task, deliver the same message, but the environment is very different. And that has to be considered when you are speaking to somebody or trying to relay a message.
Yeah. So I think that actually touches on like the first larger point that I want to touch on, which is urgency, right? And so how urgent is the thing that you're trying to communicate? Like with a hello, typically not very urgent. If someone is starting to round their spine in a dangerous way in a deadlift, that's probably pretty urgent. You might say something like, I don't know, stop, right? Like the idea that what is it? And this is ultimately, I think, something that we could spend an hour on its own on, but what are you trying to actually get across? Because I think that, and I think about this a lot, like when I think about politics and I think about a lot of other types of communication, but it's obviously just as true in fitness, is like, what's the actual goal of the communication? Are you trying to just prove how much you know? Are you trying to sound smart? Are you trying to be like, I'm right? Or are you trying to get through to someone? And I'll use a political example here because I actually think it's really illustrative. But like, if someone does something that's racist and you call them a racist, you're probably right, but they're probably not going to react very well. Correct. So is your goal to call them a racist, or is your goal to ultimately break through to them and be like, hey, the thing you did was hurtful? Because like racist has a definition, right? Like there's a thing that societally we agree, like this is what that means. But putting that name on somebody is going to cause them to get defensive and shut down, and you're probably not going to break through. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It definitely doesn't mean they're right. But what is the goal of the communication? And that gets back to the urgency level of, are you trying to stop harm in a given moment? Are you trying to set someone up for success? Are you trying to teach them something? And depending on how urgent that thing is, because like if someone's making a mistake, for instance, you want to stop them from making that mistake, but are you just trying to stop them? Or are you trying to teach them in that moment? What is the level of urgency for getting across that full expanse of that message? And so I think that's something that, especially in quote unquote crisis situations, right? Someone's at risk of injury or whatever it may be, that you have to think about is like, what am I trying to accomplish with this communication, and how am I going to break through to the person that I'm communicating to ultimately get across that message, whether it is stop or I need to teach you about the importance of lumbar spine support or neutrality in the spine during this particular exercise.
Yeah, I think so. Like when you are going to point something like that out, right? Because what you're talking about is a pretty confrontational conversation, right? And not necessarily in a bad way, but yeah, you are confronting somebody about something that you see or perceive to be dangerous and things like that. So I think one of the things that is very easy to see is it's very easy to be aware of what they need to fix. It's very easy to be aware of the things that they're doing, right? What is a more challenging thing to do is to be self-aware. Because like you said, what's my purpose in delivering this message? Am I just going to like flex on somebody right now? And am I trying to teach them? Am I trying to show them how much I know? Right? Because let's be honest, sometimes you say something to somebody just to flex, right? Whether it's because like you're in a position where you want to show that I have power and I'm the authority here and I'm your boss and you need to listen to me, or hey, I don't like the way the things you're doing because I just don't like them and I'd rather you have it do it my way. And maybe that's not even dangerous. It's just a situation of where I prefer it my way versus your way. So you have to be aware of your own ego when you're doing that, because when you come into a conversation with ego, they're going to match you with ego. It's amazing how much people will mirror the way that you start a conversation. You start a conversation with ego, you're going to get met with ego. You start a conversation with openness and vulnerability, you're going to get met with hopefully a little bit of openness and vulnerability. And if not, then there's a different conversation to have. But yeah, I think that's one of the things that you see so much of is like, all right, I want to correct this for you, but am I really correcting this for you, or am I correcting this just to, pound my own chest and show how smart I am?
It's amazing how the same feedback can be received completely differently with a simple permission to give it, right? Like, hey, can I give you a piece of feedback? Don't ever do that again. Versus, hey, don't ever do that again, right? Like, you could literally say the same thing the same exact way, but if you're given permission first, they're like, oh, okay. And I have a great example of this. And even, it wasn't even, done with ego and met with ego. I got the permission, but even just being aware of the surroundings, and you talk about that
Correct.
Environment and all that kind of stuff of making sure that as you're the person giving feedback, if that's the position that you're in, and we'll obviously talk about the other end of that spectrum as well, as we've both been, luckily at this point in our careers, we've been on both sides of that and continue to be on both sides of that. We're always looking to learn. But I had a trainer back when I was working at One Life who was doing like some med ball rotational tosses, and I wasn't doing them dangerously, just wasn't particularly coaching them well in a group class. And I was like, hey, we should do this way. And I did it in front of the clients and everything. And even though I had asked to show that, kind of made them look bad. Not kind of. It did make them look bad, right? It was like, oh, great, our guy doesn't know what he's doing. And I eventually had a boss pull me aside and was like, hey, did you correct? And I was like, yeah, we weren't doing them properly. It's like, well, next time can you not do it in front of everybody, because it kind of undercuts them. And so what I learned to do was I would, if I saw something bad happening, because I was in a mentorship position at that gym, like if I saw something bad happening, and even if there was a sense of urgency to it, someone did have, was potentially putting a client at risk, I'd be like, hey, can I steal so-and-so real quick? You go up to the client and smiling, happy. Hey, can I steal so-and-so for 30 seconds? I tell them something real quick. They'd be like, oh, yeah, take their, and typically they'd be like, oh, yeah, take them forever. The laughing, jovial, right. Like, yeah, take my trainer away. They're making me do all the hard stuff. Yeah. And I would be like, hey, just super, to the client, couldn't hear it, under my breath, like, hey, you really need to be more careful with their spine here. Make sure that when, they're doing this dumbbell row, that there's no curve, that they pinch their shoulder blades together, that their hips are back, and they're going to feel a lot better, and it's going to be a lot safer and a lot more effective. Cool? And they'd be like, yeah, cool. Thanks, man. And they go back to their client and they do the next set and they coach it up and they look like a hero. They didn't have to know that was from me. That's because it's not my client, and we're a part of a larger team. And ultimately, if I'm not doing that for stroking my own ego, and I'm actually doing that in an altruistic way to make that coach better, then pulling them aside, having them be able to give that feedback and have the reward of the client feeling good and talking to them is going to help reinforce that as well. So understanding, again, that's different than like if they're doing something completely dangerous and there's imminent danger, yeah, it might step in a different way. But understanding that level of urgency in any given moment and being able to deliver in a way that ultimately breaks through, and thinking and having the experience and the foresight and the perspective to understand how the communication is going to be received is what's going to make you a good mentor, a good person giving advice, a good whatever in that realm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I never give advice that's not asked for, right? So I'm not one to go give unsolicited advice when it's not my position to, when it's not something that like I need to do. I certainly urgently, and even in a sense where it's like, we luckily don't deal with this too much. But if there's an exercise going on and it's potentially risky, my trainers know I'm watching them, right? So and they know that they'll say, hey, what do you see? And, I'll just be there to help give some pointers, this and that, and then be on my way. And then we'll talk about it later, So it's that's the way that I kind of deal with things. For me, it's actually kind of quite opposite. I want my trainers, I want to know why my trainers aren't saying something, right? Like if I see that their client is not doing something the right way or not doing something the way that we feel is safe, then it's going to be an issue of, all right, do you not know that that's not safe? Or are you afraid to say something? Because that's part of it too, right? Because sometimes you get some trainers who are with a client and the dynamic is a little bit different, but sometimes it's instilling the confidence in them to say, hey, you can say something, you can point this out, or do you need me to come and help and point this out, and so that way you don't have to be the bad guy that like is always criticizing everybody's movement, So I'm always trying to find out the why. Like, why isn't that not that you're not saying something, but why is it that you're not saying something? Are you not paying attention? That's one thing, right? Yeah. You're either not paying attention, you don't know that that something is wrong, or you're paying attention, you know something's wrong, and you don't have the confidence to speak up, right? So, and those are three different conversations that we have.
The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Super Coffee and the new Tasty Pastry Collection. I've been telling you about it the last couple of weeks. I've been drinking it the past couple of weeks, and it's still just a delight every single day. You get the variety pack, and then you get cinnamon bun, blueberry muffin, caramel waffle. Caramel waffle, caramel waffle. I don't know. Maybe that's the next great debate. Here's what's not up for debate. They're awesome. And it's so great because the varieties are so different. And, of course, they've had great variety and flavors for a while, has Super Coffee. They've had your vanillas, your mochas, your caramels, or your caramels. They've had so many different great flavors over the years, and obviously the seasonal flavors, your peppermint mochas during the winter, your pumpkin spice varieties during the fall. But this new collection is just a new delight every single day. And maybe eventually I'll get accustomed to them. I don't want to say they're going to get old because they're too good to get old, or they get old in the way that it's like old and delightful. Hello, old friend. But for right now, I'm just enjoying it each and every day, and knowing that I'm still getting the same nutritional value that I've gotten for, our entire 4 or 5 year, whatever it is, partnership with Super Coffee. 10 grams of protein in each and every bottle, MCTs from coconut oil, and of course, 0 sugar. So to get yours, go to drinksupercoffee.com, use the code TRAIN with the best, and you get 25% off your first order. That's Train with the Best, or TWTB, at drinksupercoffee.com. The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Jakku. And I was perusing old fitness Twitter the other day. Again, you can follow us on our new account at TWTB21. And I saw someone selling let's call it similar adjacent, a timing system. We'll call it that. It was a timing system that wasn't a Jakku. And they were trying to sell it gently used because they weren't happy with it for $400. And I got in their replies and I said, may we humbly suggest our friends at Jakku Speed? And I didn't have the chance to get into the reasons why in the tweet, because it's a tweet and there's a very limited number of characters, and I didn't want to seem like I was pushing something on them. I didn't want to seem super salesy. I didn't even actually give them the discount code that I'm going to give you, because this is an advertisement in this here advertisement. But here's what you need to know. Again, they were selling this other timing system, which is a pretty popular one, for $400 used because they weren't happy with it. Well, you can get a brand new Jakku Speed system that you're going to be happy with for half the price. And actually, with our discount code, less than half the price. That's all you need to know. It's the best timing system on the market, and it costs significantly less. It's the most cost-friendly, we'll call it, timing system on the market. It's the best, and it's the most cost-friendly. What are you waiting for? Jakku.com/discount/TWTB. It'll get you 20% off. Jakku.com/discount/TWTB. That actually gets to a great thing that I want to talk about, both with clients and for you as a supervisor, as an employer, with other coaches who are beneath you, and establishing a culture and an expectation of feedback. That's right. Because my clients come to me knowing I'm going to give them feedback. Correct. That's why they're coming to me. And if you don't want to be coached, then why did you hire a coach? By the same token, I would expect when someone comes to work for Onyx, they would expect to get feedback from you or from Corey, your head coach down there in Richmond, that they're interested in learning and don't think that while they're obviously good enough to get hired and good enough to be coaching, if you don't think that you can get better, then that's not the kind of person I would think that you would hire. So how do you go about kind of establishing that expectation of feedback? And feedback, by the way, goes both ways, that someone can be able to come to you and with something and say, hey, can we improve this amongst the way that we communicate?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's almost never a situation where like something just happens out of the blue. Like we kind of know what to expect. We know when there's clients coming in, we know what their issues are, we know what their goals are and all those other things. And we have conversations about the clients before they're in there. So it's not like a client shows up that nobody knows about and all of a sudden so-and-so trainer is working with them and we're seeing things that, that we didn't expect. So it's like you said, like there's always this level of expectation of, hey, this is what we should expect from the client. This is what you should expect from the session. By the way, we'll be here to watch you if you need help, this and that, right? So there is that level of expectation that you're going to get help, that you're going to get coached. And then, setting that culture of education is just such an important thing anyway, right? Like if you have a culture of, hey, we're all trying to help each other, we're all trying to get better, we're all trying to learn more about what we're doing, and it's not, hey, I'm the expert, everybody listen to me, then we can have conversations, and it's not even a thing. It's not something that we have to think about or, tiptoe around. We just know we're going to have conversations where I feel like I can help out. Like you said, we're never going to show anybody up. We're not going to do it in front of somebody, But when you do it, it's not a thing. It's not something that you're like, oh man, this person is stepping on my toes, or how dare them say something to me, right? It's something where it's like, oh wow, I'm glad that he saw something that I didn't see,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that like when you have regular education sessions, even like there's things you can do in establishing culture that are planned, right? It doesn't have to be spontaneous conversations and whatever. In fact, culture often comes from structure. What are the structures you have in place to encourage the behaviors that you want to see? And so if you have weekly or monthly meetings that are education based, there's going to be an expectation that people are going to learn. And if you mention that in an interview and someone is like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make those a lot, that might tell you something about their personality that you might not want to bring them in because they might not be a fit for your culture. And so having the structure of regular education, which, by the way, obviously, basically every certification has that built in on some level. If you want to stay up to date on your certification, you're going to have the continuing education. But even beyond that, within your system, within your building, whether it's what you guys do at Onyx and what we used to do at One Life in Reston, having monthly meetings that are someone on the team. It doesn't have to be the same person every time. In fact, it's probably better, and not probably, it's definitely better if you have different people leading those, because you have a chance for other younger members of staff, more junior members of staff, to go research something, to present to the group, to feel like they have something to offer, and to get feedback on that in a setting where there's an expectation of feedback, but probably bring value and up the way everyone else sees them to the more senior members of the group. And so having that ability to have different people bring something to the table and heighten the education level, heighten the performance of the group as a whole. One, you're going to get better performance out of your group. And two, it does establish that culture that we're constantly critiquing what we do. We're constantly trying to find better ways. We're constantly trying to be our best. And so from a structural, like, management standpoint, I would encourage any group or anybody that's in charge of a group or anybody that's in a group that's maybe not doing that. Like if you are a more junior trainer and you're looking for more, and maybe, this podcast is part of that, like, can you go to your manager and be like, hey, what resources do we have within our company that I can learn more and that we can, as a group, elevate our games and be able to have a forum to exchange ideas?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that, like what you just said, because we started out this episode talking about communication, and communication starts with a level of expectation in a relationship, right? Like if there's no relationship, if there's no level of expectation, it really doesn't matter. And maybe the expectation is in a negative way, right? maybe they expect you to be a douche because you're a douche, right? Like seriously, if you're listening to this, and the part about it that I would encourage is that self-awareness, right? Like, it's easy to be aware of what everybody else needs to fix, right? But if you're constantly the one doing that, and you're wondering why your messages are never heard and everybody is so combative with you, maybe it's because you're a douche, right? And maybe you need to like rethink the way that you approach things, and maybe it's the way that you need to learn how to communicate. And hey, these are things that I need to improve. So before I start worrying about how I talk to everybody else, because we can give you all kinds of different tips, but at the end of the day, if this is who you really are, people are going to know who you really are. Versus what you just said, like, if you're really the type of person who is engaged and invested in your trainers and your coaches, and you want them to be the best versions of themselves, and you want to help them create a successful career in this industry and give them all the tools that they need, they're going to know that. If you're the type of trainer who walks around pounding his chest, talking about how much you know, they're going to know that too. You know what I mean? So part of this is, again, whenever you're coming into a conversation, it's your personality, the things that you need to be aware of yourself, their personality, the things that they need to be aware of, and then the environment we're in. And if you can manage those three things, you'll probably be good at communicating with people.
The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Momentous. Momentous provides the absolute best recovery tools that you could think of because they provide things that help you sleep and help your body heal. So whether you're a runner, a weightlifter, both, another kind of athlete, you need to have a regimen of supplementation to maximize your performance. Here's what Momentous offers. 1, Elite Sleep. It's a supplement that you take every single night that no matter how much you sleep will help you get more out of your sleep. Things to supplement that: magnesium, vitamin D, best taken before sleep. Get up in the morning, take your multivitamin, on your way. About 30 minutes before your workout, you take a Momentous collagen shot or a little mini shake with some collagen in it. And then when you're done, your recovery protein. And you can get that all from Momentous, and it's all going to be at the highest quality available of all of those supplements on the market. And by the way, I didn't even mention their secret weapon, the PR lotion. You got to try it. It's truly amazing. So how do you get your hands on all this good stuff? Simple. You go to livemomentous.com, you throw it all in the cart, and then when you get to the checkout page, you enter the code TRAINWITHTHEBEST25, and then it all comes to you at 25% off. And guess what? If you did it right, you set up a subscription order. Then it's going to come to you on a regular basis. You don't even have to remember to order it, and you'll never run out. And those refill orders, they're not full price. We didn't get you. No, those are 15% off each and every time. Train with the best 25 at livemomentous.com. Get your regimen up and going and watch your performance take off. The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by BlazePod, the #1 reaction training system for all levels of sports and fitness. What does that mean? Reactive training. Well, it means that BlazePod, what it actually is, what is a BlazePod? It's a light that can be programmed to light up any number of different colors. It can be on touch. It can be on random time intervals. You can program this series of lights in a variety of ways to do reaction training, to provide a visual stimulus for your athletes to do any number of movements. Could you have them slide to the light? Yes. Could you have them slide to the light if it's blue and run if it's red? Yes. Could you have them slide if it's blue, run if it's red, and not react at all if it's green? Maybe even run the other direction. You could do all of those things. And that's what's great about it. It's great for all levels of complexity. It could be as simple as touch at something that lights up. It could be decision making. It could be used, literally. The possibilities are endless. And if you download the BlazePod app, it's got pre-programmed ideas. It also gives you the ability to create your own. It's just the perfect visual stimulus reactive training system. It's why we love it so much. We were using it before they were an advertiser, and now that they're with us, we can't wait to share BlazePod with you. So much so that we got a discount for you. Of course we do. Hooking you up, 15% off. Go to blazepod.com. Use the code TWTB at checkout. That's 15% off. blazepod.com. The code is TWTB. There's a book called Crucial Conversations that was like one of the most important books that I've read in my life. My dad made me read it when I was a young professional, and it just talks about communications theory. And the #1 takeaway I had from that book is that no communication will ever be received if the person receiving it doesn't feel safe. And so, that's safe in like an emotional sense. Obviously, like physically speaking, if you're like running away from a fire and I'm like, hey, the code for the door is 4038. You're probably not going to remember the code for the door either. But emotionally speaking, right? Like, unless you feel safe, you're not going to be welcoming of information. And so making sure that whether it's a teaching environment and some of the education like peer-to-peer that we've been talking about, or we think about how we talk to our clients to make sure that we're not talking down to them, right? Like, obviously we're professionals. We should know more than them. And I think sometimes in fitness, because there's so much information out there, like it can almost be hard for them to remember, like, oh yeah, we're professionals. Like, just because it's something that's very accessible, fitness being very accessible, doesn't mean that we don't have a heightened level of expertise. But how do we use that heightened level of expertise in a way that elevates their experience and doesn't make them feel dumb, for lack of a better way to put it, and making sure that communication always happens in a way where there's safety involved. And then another thing that I think about too, Chris, with that is like anger, which like obviously we think of communication goes badly, someone lashes out, right? Anger is often a secondary reaction to something else, someone feeling unsafe, for instance. They feel threatened and thus they lash out in anger. And so I think that making sure if you ever do have a client who is upset or a coach or a colleague who is upset for some reason about something, how you react to that to understand the primary reaction and identify what it is that made them go to anger in the first place is going to help you ultimately resolve that and ultimately get through whatever message that you were trying to get through in the first place.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that, because anger is that secondary response to feeling unsafe, and frustration is a response to repetitive disappointment. So again, like if somebody's angry with you, it's because they probably didn't feel safe. If somebody's frustrated with you, it's because you've repeatedly disappointed them, right? So again, it's part of that self-awareness. Like, am I making my clients or my trainers or the person I'm talking to, do they know where I'm coming from? Am I coming in a safe environment? And am I managing my own ego, my own personality in this conversation? And like you said, what's the goal of this conversation? Is it really to help this person learn and to help them understand the things that I want them to understand, or is it to pound my own chest? And am I going to use language that they don't even understand just to make myself sound smart? Or am I going to yell at them because I'm in a position that I can yell at them and they're not going to yell back, right? Like, those are all things that you have to manage if you want to be an effective communicator. If you want to just pound your chest, keep doing what you're doing. Right.
I mean, that gets back to the original point that I made of like, what's the point of this communication? Because if you want to just be able to be like, I told them everything. It's like, yeah, but did they receive any of it? Yeah. And that's when, asking questions is obviously really important too, right? Like, do you have a dialogue that's back and forth? And do people feel safe enough to be honest with the response, right? Because we've all been in situations where we're just trying to end that communication of whatever it is. We're like, yeah, sure, I got it. Sure, whatever. Yeah, okay. Oh, thank God that's over, right? As opposed to actually engaging in an honest back and forth. And especially, I think this becomes a major factor when you are trying to explain something that's a little bit more complicated, which, I don't know, in fitness, if you're doing super complicated stuff with clients, like that might be a separate podcast, a separate conversation.
Right.
But if you are trying to explain something that's not breaking through for whatever reason, you don't want the client to leave feeling dumb, because that's not a good feeling. Because we've all felt that too. Not very fun, right? So if you can keep that lane of communication open, be super empathetic, be super understanding, and say, well, what is it that, where am I losing you? What is it that you are understanding? What part of this do you get? Okay, let's pick back up there. And having those tools to draw those lines clearly, I think is really important, is going to make you a much better communicator. But again, you're never going to be able to intake that information in the first place if the person you're talking to doesn't feel safe.
Yep.
All right, anything else that you want to touch on from this, whether it's presenting to the masses or individual one-on-one conversations? Anything else to add?
Yeah, what we were just talking about is that anger and frustration part. Remember, it's about your self-awareness too, right? Like, you got to be aware of your own anger and your own frustration. Like, if you're confronting somebody, or if you're talking to somebody and you need to get a point across, like, you got to manage your own emotions and your own anger and your own frustration with somebody, right? So those are things that I think gets forgotten, because it's all about how to fix the other person. But emotional intelligence is such a huge factor of being able to communicate effectively, because once emotions get into it, then emotions get matched, emotions get mirrored, whether it's ego or anger, frustration, anxiety, that gets matched. So if you can learn how to understand the emotion that you're feeling, right, and then set that aside so that you can effectively communicate, that will also help, prevent any of those emotions from being matched.
At the end of the day, always got to first understand what the goal is. In many ways, it's the same as training, right? What are we actually trying to accomplish here? And then at that point, you can put together a plan and stick to it in a way that you actually accomplish that goal. So are you trying to prove your point, or are you trying to have your point received? So that's that. All right. If you would like to communicate with us on Instagram, he's at Trainer Gorres. I'm at Craig_Hoffman on Twitter, at Craig Hoffman, at Trainer Gorres. And then the show is at TWTB21 on Twitter and at Train with the Best 21 on Instagram. That's Chris Gorres. I'm Craig Hoffman. Hopefully now you feel like you can communicate just a little bit better. And we'll see you next week right back here on the Train with the Best podcast. Thanks for checking out this video. If you like it, we got more. Make sure you subscribe right here on YouTube and check out our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, or even our website. It's got everything there. All the links you could possibly want. Go check it out. Trainwiththebest21.com.